First of all, I'd like to welcome everyone to this broadcast. So my name is Ria Ancheta Adrias, and I am the Director of Operations for the National Council for Entrepreneurial Tech Transfer, and we are based in Washington, D.C. And we have been working with Hyundai Cradle for the last 2 years, helping them source startups for their different startup support programs. So we do technology scouting for them. We also help them source startups for, two of their flagship programs, one of which we will talk about today with our guest, which is called the Open Innovation Lounge. So Hyundai has this program every year where they bring the best of the best startups to look for innovative technologies to put in future vehicles. And I'm speaking today with Smartpaint Solutions, and I am with Andy Dixon, their CEO and founder. So Andy, how are you today?
I'm fine. How are you, Ria?
Pretty good, pretty good. And I'm glad you and I get to talk again. So
yes, thanks for having me.
Yes, and thank you for, sharing, for sharing your time with us to talk about your experience with working with Hyundai for their Open Innovation Lounge. I mean, I think it is a pretty good program. I mean, I've heard a lot about it, and I think it's been running for 2 or 3 years. They've had it. They started it, I think, in 2020. But before we go there, maybe you can tell me a little bit more about Smartpaint Solutions, because I've been doing some reading about your company, and it looks like a very interesting coatings company. So maybe we can start there. What do you guys do? Yeah.
We are, I call us an advanced materials company. And so we use nanomaterials in a patented way to add functional pigments to coatings. And what this means is that you can literally put heat anywhere you can paint it. And that has a lot of implications, whether it's in a car or on a drone or even on my sidewalk at home. I use it to melt the snow and ice off the sidewalks and porch there. So lots of applications. It's interesting because it's so controllable. You can literally control the heat by, it's like the dimmer switch on a light. So the more power you put in, the more heat you get. And that means we can go anywhere from just above freezing to melt snow and ice, all the way up to cooking temperatures like 700 degrees Fahrenheit, about 375 Celsius. And so for the car, in this case, the Palisade car, we see it as a way not only to keep passengers comfortable inside the car, but also keep snow and ice from forming on critical surfaces. That'll be important when it gets to drones, in flight. Everything we can do in terms of keeping the passenger comfortable inside will also be important for safety on the control surfaces of the drones. And even on a regular vehicle, you've got windshield wipers and side view mirrors and wheel wells and things like that you could keep free of ice and snow. So safety is important, comfort is important. And the other thing to remember about it is it's very, very lightweight. So we're only talking about 3 grams per square foot. And that's important on an electric vehicle because every ounce matters and every watt of energy that you use matters. So we can extend the range of the car that way. And on drones, of course, weight's really important as well. So unique characteristics to this functional coating, and we're finding more and more ways every day to use it. So
interesting. No, that's really, really good. So it allows you to, use it in different kinds of applications. So buildings, you can do that too. So that
there are architectural applications. Yeah. There's obviously the snow and ice, and then indoor radiant heat. So I also use it in my kitchen and my sun porch to keep the floors warm. Lots of architectural applications. Like
so you basically test the product before you roll it out. Okay.
I've been my own field trial.
So how is it applied? Is it applied like the way it sounds, like paint?
Literally, we spray it with a spray gun that you buy at Home Depot. It doesn't have to be cured at any special temperature or condition. You spray it on and you wait for it to dry and then add power, and you get heat.
And how does it compare to regular paint? Because you said it's lightweight, right? So if Smartpaint is like 3 grams per square foot, like how much does paint kind of?
Oh, so it'll be just like the paint you'd buy. So we basically modify existing paints. So you take an
Oh.
existing urethane coating or an existing
Hmm.
latex coating, and we add our pigment to it, and it turns that paint into a functional paint. And so all the mechanical properties are the same, except now we've added heat.
Oh, oh no, that's really great. So you like I can just get a liter of paint from Home Depot and tell you, hey Andy, I want to
Well,
make
we're
sure.
not quite that, yeah, it's not quite that sophisticated yet, but that's the idea. Yeah,
Okay.
so
Mm-hmm.
if you have a coating that's designed for outdoor use, for example, it would be great.
Mm-hmm.
We even used it for asphalt treatment. We did a section of our parking lot and
That's
put it in the
mhm.
asphalt coating and then warmed it up that way.
Wow. So it's possible that there are people listening right now, or I'm walking around and I have no idea that it's been coated by one of your products.
Possible, although
Yeah.
unlikely. We've only really applied it in some places here in Columbus and then down in Houston, Texas, where it was originated.
So, but how long has your company been running at this point?
We spent about 8 years validating the technology, perfecting the technology. Our lead scientist studied under Richard Smalley at Rice University, and Richard got the Nobel Prize for discovering buckyballs. And so Kyle Kissel, our lead scientist, studied under him. He was working on a project for Boeing to create lightweight wires. And that project did not work, but
Mm-hmm.
he learned how to make coatings in the process. And so we are the beneficiaries of that, because before
Mm-hmm.
that we were making what we called nano paper, and nano paper was a very expensive, difficult to make, difficult to handle. It looked exactly like the carbon paper you would use to make copies.
Mm-hmm.
um, Not nearly as functional as this. Now that it's in paint, you can literally paint it and turn on power, and this makes it commercially viable. It's much more affordable. It's easier to apply and use, and that means less disruption to, say, manufacturing process too. You know, if you can paint the part, you can make it a heater. So
Okay. I kind of smile when you mentioned carbon paper because the younger generation now probably don't know what that is.
no idea what that is.
So so this kind of reflects my age because I do remember using that for, for when I needed to duplicate some of the papers I typed up in high school. But
Yes, yes, the old days.
exactly. So but for for smart paint, like aside from before you ended up in Open Innovation Lounge, I'm sure you kind of made the rounds of going through different different programs, whether it's university programs or startup programs. Like did that kind of help you gain enough experience so when you do reach at startups kind of do these pitches, not necessarily to find funding right away, but more as practices so they can refine their message. So before you kind of got to Open Innovation Lounge, did you have to go through that? I mean, as the
Well,
company
we
CEO.
did the typical circuit, where you do the business plan competition. And in fact, that's how I took my nano paper project down to Rice University, and that's how I got connected to them.
Hmm.
And so I realized they had something better, and we licensed it instead. But nothing in that realm, in terms of the economic development or academic realm, did anything as important as what Hyundai was able to do with this
Hmm.
Open Innovation Lounge. That changed
Hmm.
everything for us. And so, now we have a commercial partner, and we're trying this in the real world on real parts that we can see the path forward,
Yeah.
instead of just, different heaters in the lab, or
Hmm.
different tests you can do that way. So having it validated that way by a commercial partner is really game changing.
Yeah. No, that's actually true because, a lot of these corporates, and this began probably 12, 13, 14 years ago, where they really made the push to look for these technologies that most often, because, universities and sometimes even startups don't have the capacity to scale it up or don't have enough funding to do the product development, they usually end up on the shelf or the startups fail. um, but for corporates, their biggest problem is finding the right fit I mean, Hyundai is one of those companies that happily engage with startups, but finding the right fit that actually works within their vehicles is a very difficult, it's a very difficult proposition for a startup to make, because you can't, I mean, if you're a square peg and they're a round hole, you can't really do anything about it, because technologies can't just be tweaked, right?
Yes. And in fact, that was, if I can tell you a little bit about the application process when we got into the Open Innovation Lounge, they really just wanted, it was a series of conversations that started with Hachi and ended up at Cradle in California. But Cradle was the hub of Hyundai's innovation efforts in mobility. And they just needed to understand the technology. They wanted to make sure they understood how it worked and how it was applied, and they wanted to get comfortable with the commercial viability of it. In other words, is this affordable? Is it something that we can build at scale? If they can answer those questions and know it's got commercially viable prospect here with some help, then they could develop the formal statement of work and budget and get us into the innovation lounge, and it began that process. So it was pretty straightforward, pretty seamless. In terms of deciding to get there. I mean, it helped that we had this great technology and we knew it worked.
Yeah, true. And before you actually stumbled, like, how did you find out about Open Innovation Lounge? Was it?
So we
Mhm.
we got a call from an engineer at Hachi. She'd heard about Smartpaint from one of the other startup companies that was already in the Innovation Lounge. And after a few introductory calls, she was able to shepherd us through this process, get us introduced to Cradle, and told us about, could we do, or asked us, could we do one side of a Palisade vehicle? So we were going to do the seat cushion, seat back, door panel, armrest, and glove box inside of a Palisade car. And this then would be showcased in the Innovation Lounge to the key executives and decision makers at Hyundai rather. And we said, sure, we can do that. We had no idea if we could because we had never done it before. But we believed, and so we did. It turns out that the heaters we made for that showcase, they got hotter faster than the existing alternative, and they used 1/2 the power. And so that was important, not so much for an internal combustion engine because there's plenty of power available, but in an electric vehicle, if you can save half the power on the heating, that means more power available for moving the car forward, and it extends the range. And
Yeah.
by the way, another part of extending the range is we can heat the batteries in the car. And so in cold climates, that matters a lot, not only for recharging, but also how they operate. So if you can heat the batteries with their own power and keep them in an ideal operating range, then they are more efficient, and then the car goes further.
Mm. No, that's really interesting, because then because of the kind of application that the technology entails, like, just brushing it on or spraying it on, you can isolate where it goes to a really specific area.
Yes, and in fact, you can control, if you wanted some part to be a little bit hotter than another part, you can control that simply by how thick the coating is there. So you make it thicker in one spot, it'll get hotter there, thinner in another spot, it'll get less hot there. So we have design flexibility that you don't find with other heaters as well.
Wow, I was just thinking about, how those science expeditions, work, like in the South Pole,
Yes,
right? Right. I
yeah.
mean, there was this, I don't know if you've heard about this company like Canada Goose. Like, that's how they started, right? They started with the coats for a science expeditions, and now it's like this whole luxury commercial product. So, I mean, for your, for Smart Paint, I think what's interesting here with the story on, the application and the conversations that you had with Hyundai, I mean, it does make you feel and believe that they are very supportive of the work that startups do. Is that the same impression that you got when you were speaking with them?
Yeah, in fact, I was thinking that as I look back on the whole process, they were once we were selected to be on in the Innovation Lounge, that's when things got really quite good for us. The teams were incredibly helpful and responsive to us. They seemed to have this innate awareness of our capabilities and limitations as a startup. A lot of times when you work with these great big companies,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they move at glacial speeds and they work at their own time scale. Hyundai, on the other hand, was very responsive to us, very supportive of us. We had routine calls with the team at Hachi at Cradle and a team in Korea who would end up doing the implementation of the product. And so they provided everything we needed in terms of prototype parts and I think we were also in a bit of due diligence with them. They wanted to see if we could deliver on time and
Mm-hmm.
deliver what we said we would when we said we would. And so we went through that. And it turns out that with their support, we got through it exactly as expected. And although there were probably 100 things that could have gone wrong with the heaters once they got from our labs in Columbus, Ohio to
Mm-hmm.
California and then ultimately to Seoul, nothing went wrong. It all worked exactly as it did. It worked in Seoul exactly as it did in our lab
Mm-hmm.
here. So we were really happy with that outcome.
Mm-hmm. Like, did one of your guys, or were you guys able to make it to Seoul?
No, because of COVID, there was at the time when we were making those planning decisions, it was a 3-week quarantine, or it
Mm.
would have been a 3-week trip because it was 2 weeks in quarantine and a week for the show. And
Mm-hmm.
so we couldn't do that. Now, hopefully, you know, if they open things up next year, why it'll be a lot easier for startups to send a team. And I think that'll be a whole nother level of experience for them because you'll have that in-person ability to relate. Not only,
Yeah.
you know, these technologies sometimes are difficult concepts, but if you can see it, feel it, touch it, and then be there in person to explain it, that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah. And I guess because, they're working with vehicles, they're working with, these automobiles, and these are engineers who want to see how things work, right? Whenever I have a conversation with Hyundai, with C1 and members of his team, they
Mhm.
always emphasize, if they can't touch it, if they can't see how it works, if whether it's a prototype or whether it's like a minimum, and a minimum viable product, chances are it's going to be difficult for our product teams and their engineers to kind of visualize how it's going to end up in the car. I mean, for the process that you went through, um, tell us about the time. Like, how long did it take you guys, like from the initial call to saying, hey, we want to bring you on for Open Innovation Lounge? Like, did it take weeks, months?
No, it was just weeks, really. I think we got our first call from Hachi in March or April. Then we started having conversations with Cradle
Mm-hmm.
very soon after that. And within a few weeks, they had decided, okay, we're going to move forward. And that was important because the show was in November. And for us to be able to make the prototypes, test everything, and get everything working, we backed it up. So we had it all ready, probably 6 or 8 weeks ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And that way we could, if we needed to, make new ones or make second backup parts and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And an important lesson was they said we were going to rely on a Bluetooth control panel and everything was going to be done by touch screen. So you control the heat. Every panel, by
Mm-hmm.
the way, that we made was independently controlled. So you could select your own comfort settings for the seat back and various parts.
Mm-hmm.
And our vision, of course, is that we do the entire passenger cabin this way. And that means every passenger can control their own comfort levels with settings that way. And they said, keep in mind, Bluetooth might not work in the lounge there or in the headquarters building in
Oh.
Seoul. So you need for it to be controlled by a backup or manual system as well. And so we did spend a few weeks getting that backup system working. Now it turns out we didn't need it, but it was there
Mm-hmm.
if we had to have it. So it was kind of like make sure this thing operates on the moon as it would here, and have a backup to the backup.
What was the backup? Was it like, wires, Wi-Fi? What was it?
It
Then
was
it was.
all hardwired, yes. So it was no
Wow.
switches,
Okay.
and dials, and wires, but it worked, but importantly, the wireless one, the Bluetooth one worked as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I heard for the Open Innovation Lounge, it's not just the, it's not just the engineers who are there or the product team who's there. It's like the CEO, the different VPs, and not just for
yeah,
Hyundai, right? I mean, Kia, I think they have a bunch of other brands, Genesis,
yeah.
in the lounge. So you're not just addressing like one brand here. You're actually opening it up to,
And
um,
we, after the lounge was done, we had some inquiries from other tier one suppliers in Korea.
mhm,
So we know that the only place they could have possibly heard about us was there. And so it definitely had that
mhm,
broader effect or that bigger effect for us.
mhm. Yeah. I know the kind of personal and emotional support is important for projects like this. It's always important to be part of the team. But did Hyundai provide you with anything else? Like, did they give funding, or did they have a person like really kind of, you know, manage the entire process for you?
Yes. So our primary point of contact was the engineer at Hachi who had introduced us to the
Hmm.
opportunity. And we were on calls with her more than once a week. They
Mm,
also provided funding for they paid for the time and materials that we
mm,
needed to make the parts, which was critical for us as a startup, having that kind of support. So we had the monetary support we needed. We had technical resource in Hachi,
mhm,
and routine calls with her to make sure we were on track and on target and delivering what they wanted, importantly.
mhm,
And so they checked it, throughout the process. We had this sort of validating uh, feedback loop with Hachi,
mhm,
and made sure that when we delivered in November, it was exactly what we needed. And I think that's what led to, by the way, if I can segue into post Innovation Lounge, we now have a project going on with Hyundai
oh, that's
for
good.
2022. We're going to do
Mhm,
a surround heat system. It's going to be the entire passenger cabin and maybe some of the other features I mentioned, like side mirrors and batteries. Um, so outside the passenger cabin. But that project is because of Innovation Lounge and our ability to perform there. And we're just getting started with that. They're going to send us a car. Uh, it won't be drivable, but they're sending us a car that we can experiment with and test
mhm.
on. And so hopefully, in a few years' time, you'll see this on their cars in production.
Wow. So when you say in a few years, like how long is that development part for
My
us
guess
to see
is,
commercially?
yeah, primarily this is about all of the testing that has to happen, the life cycle testing and the hot cold testing and all those things they do to make sure it works the way they want it to. And then also scale up, right? So we have a partner that we're working with to help us get it ready for production at high volumes.
Mm-hmm.
And they can ensure that, part number 300,000 is the same as part number 4. And
Mm-hmm.
and so those are the kinds of things that we're doing in the next year and a half to 2 years. My guess is it'll be a maybe 2024,
Mm-hmm.
2025 kind of time frame
Mm-hmm.
to see it in the field in a meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. Are you kind of tied to working with Hyundai at this point, or can you work with other with competitors, or do you have to kind of stay with them exclusively until a
We
certain point?
we have not done an exclusive with them, but
Mhm,
my guess is that as this progresses, they may want some limited exclusivity for
mhm.
some period of time. We'd be open to that, but right now we're able to, if we, find other opportunities or other mobility partners, we can do that.
Yeah.
I don't see a need to right now. Frankly, they're helping us lead the way
Mm-hmm.
in terms of developing the product and developing the process that'll turn it into a product. So yeah, we're not bound, but we're also looking forward to maybe figuring out some kind of
Mm-hmm.
exclusive.
Yeah. And there are other applications, as you mentioned before. So, I mean, they're like architectural applications, probably, even going, um, what do you call this? Maybe for, um, uh, maybe for factories, or, and it'll save on, heating, let's say for cities, and, in a more sustainable way, because instead of you spending a lot of money on heating bills, like for your home, then this might be more energy efficient. I mean, does this have like this? Do you guys see like the climate change angle also when it comes to energy conservation and stuff like
Yes, as
that?
a matter of fact, one of the projects that we were able to secure, partly because of this Hyundai connection, but also partly because of the storms that happened in Texas last year,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to prove our ability to do snow and ice melt on wind turbines. And so we're working with one of the big wind turbine companies to test this out. We'll put our paint on the blades and then we can keep them free of snow and ice during the winter months. That actually accounts for 30% of the time that the wind turbines cannot move when they're frozen.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can prove that our technology keeps that from happening, that keeps them up and running all year long. Same with solar panels. In Germany, we got a call from a company in Germany that said, look, our solar panels don't work because they're buried in snow. And if we can provide heat to keep the snow melted off of them, then they'll work all year long as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that aspect of the green or clean energy, climate tech, you might
Yeah.
say. So wind turbines, obviously everything we've made so far, whether it's food warming devices or appliances or
Mm-hmm.
car seat heaters, has proven that we're using about 1/2 the power. And so if we can, reduce our footprint that way. And by the way, most appliances, we did a project for a company that makes hair flattening irons, and found that
Oh.
we could flattening iron with just battery powered. So
Mm-hmm.
all these appliances that right now require you to plug them into the wall, they might be able to be operated on batteries. In this case, it was 7.4 volts that heated the hair iron to 365 degrees Fahrenheit
Mm-hmm.
and worked for about 20 minutes, which was plenty of time for that use.
Okay. Well, not for my hair. It usually takes a long time. So you may need to improve on that. So
Yes, we'll have to get better at make it last longer.
you need to interview a lot more women to see how much time they use their curling irons and their flat irons.
Yes.
So
We'll get there. I think maybe that you might see that in less time than you see on the
on the
or sooner
car.
than you see in the cars.
No, this is really great. So maybe just to quickly wrap up. So what are the next steps? What is in store for for Smartpaint Solutions, like after your experience with Hyundai and working with them? And I assume this is is this like the first corporate that you actually worked with, or like at this level?
Yes, so this is the first one that has staying power. We've had others that, as I say, when you're working with big global corporations, lots of times, for example, the flooring company we were working with was acquired by another firm in Europe, and so the project got canceled. Or another company we were working with on camping gear was acquired by another firm, and so the project was sidelined. I mean,
Mhm.
those things happen all the time when you're dealing with these companies. For us, Hyundai was the one that not only are they going to be here for the future, but I see us getting into new kinds of mobility, and not just cars, but also drones and all the infrastructure that supports those drones. So the charging stations and the vertiports and the purpose-built vehicles that will transport people to and from the drone
Mhm.
vertiports.
Mhm.
All of that has application for us and literally can help change the way the world gets heat and change the way the world moves. And
Mhm.
so I think that's why this Hyundai partnership is so important for us and so energizing for us, is that we know that they see that future, and they I think right now see us as a part of helping them get there.
That is awesome. Yeah. So thank you so much for spending the time with us to talk to us about Open Innovation Lounge. I think it's such a great opportunity for startups. And I think the one takeaway here is basically perseverance at this point, especially for a
Yes,
startup.
that is correct. You got to persevere through persistence through chaos, I call it.
You
Um,
have to kiss a lot of frogs to get the right partner for you,
yeah.
especially if you're doing something special like Smart Paint.
Well, thank you for allowing us to tell our story and share our story. We're so excited to be working with Hyundai and continuing this 2022 project. And it really is going to open doors for us, going forward. I think it may be the first domino that fell that makes this whole thing propel forward.
All right. So thank you so much for your time, Andy. And if anyone has any questions about Open Innovation Lounge, we'd be happy to kind of help walk you through the process of submitting your company. And Andy, would you be open to doing that as well? Like if someone wants to talk to you about it?
Anybody wants to learn about our process or what we went through, or I can help navigate that in any way, I'd be happy to talk one-on-one with anybody who is considering this.
All right. So again, thank you so much, Andy. And we look forward to speaking with you again and, hear a lot more great things about the company
Thank
as
you.
it
I
moves
appreciate
forward.
it.